The lights in the studio were bright, almost blinding, but Greg Miller was used to it. He sat comfortably in his chair, leaning slightly forward with a smirk on his face as he scanned the teleprompter. His co-host Lisa Dawson adjusted her microphone and glanced at him nervously. She knew that look. It meant Greg was about to say something provocative. The audience, a mix of locals and tourists who had won tickets to attend the live taping, buzzed with excitement. They loved Greg's humor, even when it crossed the line sometimes. That night's episode was supposed to focus on celebrity couples, a topic chosen because it always drew high ratings. Pictures of famous pairs flashed on the screen behind them. Actors, musicians, athletes, all smiling happily together. Greg launched into his usual banter, cracking jokes about how some celebrities stayed married, despite their differences, while others couldn't make it past 6 months. The crowd laughed along, though Lisa noticed a few people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Some of Greg's comments felt mean-spirited, but they kept the energy up, so no one said anything. Then came the moment Lisa had been dreading. A photo of Chuck Norris appeared on the screen, followed by a picture of his wife, Mary. Chuck's name alone commanded respect. He wasn't just an actor or martial artist, but a cultural icon. People admired him not only for his movies and TV shows, but also for his quiet strength and humility. Beside him, Mary looked elegant, yet unassuming. Her smile was warm, but she didn't have the same larger-than-life presence as her husband. Greg leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against the desk. "So, let's talk about Chuck and Mary," he began, his tone light but with an edge. "Chuck, obviously, is a legend. I mean, come on. The guy could probably fight off a bear with his bare hands if he wanted to." The audience chuckled, nodding in agreement. "But what about Mary?" Greg continued, raising an eyebrow. "Does anyone really know much about her? What does she bring to the table besides being married to Chuck?" Lisa shifted in her seat, feeling uneasy. She opened her mouth to intervene, maybe steer the conversation towards something more positive, but Greg plowed ahead. "I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being supportive, letting your spouse shine. But doesn't she ever get tired of living in his shadow? Or maybe she has a secret talent we don't know about." Mary, sitting in the guest chair across from them, listened patiently. She wore a simple blue dress that complemented her fair complexion, and her blonde hair was styled neatly. Her expression remained calm, almost serene, as if she'd heard this kind of thing before. To most people, she might have seemed like just another celebrity spouse dragged onto a talk show to fill airtime. But those who knew her well understood that Mary was far from ordinary. Greg turned his attention directly to her now, leaning forward with exaggerated curiosity. "Mary, tell us, is there anything exciting going on in your life that we should know about? Any hidden talents or hobbies you've been keeping under wraps?" He grinned widely, clearly expecting a light-hearted answer. Maybe she'd mention gardening or baking cookies for charity events, something safe and predictable. Mary tilted her head slightly, meeting his gaze without flinching. There was a brief pause, during which the entire studio seemed to hold its breath. Then she smiled, softly, and replied, "Well, actually, I do enjoy playing the piano. It's something I've been passionate about for many years," the audience murmured in surprise. This wasn't the response they, or Greg, had anticipated. Playing the piano? That sounded too refined, too serious for someone who spent most of her time out of the spotlight. Greg raised his eyebrows, trying to mask his skepticism. "Oh, really? The piano, huh? That's interesting. Do you play often?" "Yes," Mary answered simply. "It helps me relax after long days. And yes, I practice regularly." Greg exchanged a quick glance with Lisa, who gave him a subtle shake of her head, warning him not to push too hard, but Greg ignored her. He couldn't resist poking fun at situations like this. It was part of his charm, or so he believed. "Regularly, huh? So, are we talking beginner-level stuff here? Or are you ready to perform Beethoven's Fifth Symphony for us tonight?" His joke earned scattered laughter from the audience, though it lacked genuine enthusiasm. Lisa forced a polite smile, sensing the tension building. She tried to interject, asking Mary questions about her favorite composers or pieces, but Greg cut her off. Come on, Mary, he pressed, his grin widening. Don't leave us hanging. If you're such a big fan of the piano, surely you must have tackled something challenging by now, right? Mary's smile never wavered. She folded her hands neatly in her lap and said, Actually, I've been working on Beethoven's Hammerklavier Sonata. It's considered one of the most difficult compositions in classical music. The room fell silent. Even Greg stopped mid-sentence, his mouth slightly open. Beethoven's Hammerklavier Sonata, the same piece that had intimidated world-class pianists for centuries. Surely this quiet woman sitting across from him wasn't serious. Lisa blinked rapidly, unsure whether to laugh or gasp. The audience exchanged confused glances, wondering if they'd misheard. Greg recovered quickly, chuckling nervously. Wow, okay, that's quite the claim. Are you telling me you can actually play that monster of a sonata? Mary nodded once, her eyes steady. Yes, I can. For a moment, nobody spoke. Greg stared at her, searching for any sign of hesitation or exaggeration. When he found none, he shrugged theatrically and gestured to the stage manager. All right then, let's see it. Bring out a piano, folks. Let's put Mary to the test. Behind the scenes, the crew scrambled to wheel in a grand piano. Cameras zoomed in on Mary as she stood up gracefully and walked over to the instrument. Her movements were deliberate, unhurried, as if she were completely unaware of the weight of the situation. Greg leaned back in his chair again, crossing his arms. He still didn't believe she could pull it off, but he was curious to see where this would go. Lisa watched silently, biting her lip. She felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation. Something told her that what was about to happen would change everything, not just for Mary, but for all of them. The grand piano was rolled onto the stage, its polished surface gleaming under the bright studio lights. The audience watched in silence, their earlier laughter replaced by a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. Mary stood beside the instrument, her posture calm and composed. She didn't fidget or glance nervously at the crowd. Instead, she seemed to be in her own world, as if the hundreds of eyes on her didn't matter at all. Greg leaned forward in his chair again, his smirk returning. He still couldn't shake the feeling that this was all some kind of setup, a joke Mary was playing on him. All right, Mary, he said, his tone teasing but with an edge of challenge. You've made a bold claim here. Are you really ready to prove it? Because, let's be honest, not many people can just sit down and play Beethoven's Hammerklavier Sonata. It's legendary. Mary turned to face him, her expression unreadable. I understand, she replied softly, but I wouldn't have mentioned it if I wasn't prepared. With that, she took a seat at the piano bench, adjusting it slightly to her height. Her hands rested gently on her lap, waiting for the signal to begin. Lisa, sitting beside Greg, looked increasingly uncomfortable. She knew how this could go wrong, how quickly things could spiral into awkwardness or even embarrassment. But there was something about Mary's demeanor that made her hesitate. Lisa had interviewed countless guests over the years, and she'd learned to read people pretty well. Mary didn't seem like someone who was bluffing. Still, the stakes were high, and Lisa couldn't help but feel uneasy. Greg, on the other hand, was enjoying himself. This was exactly the kind of unpredictable moment that made live television exciting. All right, folks, he announced to the audience, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Let's see if Mary Norris can wow us with one of the toughest pieces ever written. Shall we? The audience clapped half-heartedly, unsure what to expect. Some whispered among themselves, wondering whether they were about to witness something incredible or painfully awkward. A few people pulled out their phones, ready to record whatever happened next. Backstage, the crew exchanged nervous glances. No one had expected this turn of events when they arrived at work that morning. Mary ignored the chatter around her. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, taking a deep breath. Then, without hesitation, she placed her hands on the keys. For a split second, nothing happened. The room was so quiet you could hear the faint hum of the studio lights. And then, she began to play. The first notes rang out, clear and commanding, filling the space with an intensity that no one saw coming. The audience froze, their murmurs dying instantly. Even Greg, who had been leaning casually against the desk, straightened up in his chair. His smirk faltered, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. Lisa's mouth dropped open slightly, her pen slipping from her fingers and rolling across the table. What followed was nothing short of extraordinary. Mary's fingers moved across the keyboard with precision and power, tackling the piece's famously difficult passages with ease. The Hammer-Clavier Sonata was known for its complexity, its rapid shifts in tempo, intricate harmonies, and demanding physical technique. Yet Mary played it as though she'd been born to do so. Each note was crisp and deliberate, every phrase flowing seamlessly into the next. The audience sat mesmerized, unable to look away. Some leaned forward in their seats, while others pressed their hands to their mouths in awe. A few people wiped tears from their eyes, overwhelmed by the beauty of what they were hearing. Even the cameramen, usually focused solely on their job, found themselves pausing to listen. The music seemed to transcend the boundaries of the studio, reaching something deeper within everyone present. Greg, meanwhile, struggled to process what he was witnessing. He had mocked Mary only moments ago, dismissing her claim as impossible. Now, here she was, proving him wrong in the most spectacular way imaginable. His initial shock gave way to a growing sense of unease. He glanced at Lisa, hoping for some kind of reassurance, but she was too captivated by the performance to notice. As Mary reached the sonata's climactic sections, the energy in the room shifted. The music swelled, filling every corner of the studio with its raw emotion. Notes cascaded like waterfalls, each one perfectly placed, each chord resonating with depth and meaning. It was as if Mary wasn't just playing the piano, she was telling a story, sharing a piece of her soul with everyone who listened. When she finally reached the final notes, the entire studio held its breath. The last chord hung in the air, reverberating long after her hands had lifted from the keys. For a moment there was absolute silence. Then, slowly, the audience erupted into applause. People stood up, clapping and cheering, their voices blending into a thunderous roar. Some whistled, others shouted words of praise, but all shared the same sentiment. They had just witnessed something unforgettable. Greg remained seated, his face pale. He hadn't planned for this, not in the slightest. His earlier jokes now felt cruel and misplaced, and he knew it. Beside him, Lisa recovered enough to join the standing ovation, though her eyes kept darting toward Greg, silently urging him to say something. Anything. Finally, Greg cleared his throat and stood up, forcing a smile onto his face. "Well," he began, his voice shaky. "I think I speak for everyone when I say, wow, just wow." The audience laughed lightly, appreciating his attempt to recover. "Mary, I owe you an apology. I clearly underestimated you, and I'm sorry for that. That was absolutely incredible." Mary rose from the piano bench, her expression unchanged. She nodded graciously, accepting his apology without resentment. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'm glad you enjoyed it." Lisa jumped in quickly, eager to steer the conversation in a more positive direction. "Mary, that was truly amazing. I don't think any of us were expecting something like that. How long have you been practicing this piece?" Mary smiled faintly, her gaze softening. "For several years now. It's not something you can master overnight, but it's been worth every minute of effort." The audience continued to cheer, unwilling to let the moment end. Someone shouted, "Encore!" and soon others joined in, chanting the word until the whole studio echoed with it. Mary shook her head politely, laughing softly. "Maybe another time," she said, her voice warm. "But thank you all for your support." Backstage, the crew buzzed with excitement. One of the producers approached Greg during a commercial break, grinning ear to ear. "Do you realize what just happened?" he asked. "That clip is going to go viral. You might have stumbled onto the best thing that's ever happened to this show." Greg forced a laugh, though his heart wasn't in it. He felt a mix of admiration and shame. Admiration for Mary's undeniable talent and grace under pressure, and shame for the way he'd treated her before the performance. As the show returned from the break, Greg made a conscious effort to be more respectful, asking thoughtful questions and giving Mary the platform she deserved. By the time the episode wrapped up, Mary had won over not just the audience, but also Greg and Lisa. They thanked her profusely as she left the stage, promising to stay in touch. Outside the studio, fans waited eagerly to meet her, many holding flowers or handwritten notes expressing their gratitude for the inspiring performance. As Mary stepped into the cool night air, she felt a sense of peace. She hadn't set out to prove anything to anyone. Not Greg, not the audience, not even herself. All she had wanted was to share her love for music, to remind people that everyone has hidden depths worth exploring. And tonight, she had done exactly that. The days following Mary's performance on Greg Miller's talk show passed in a whirlwind. Clips of her playing Beethoven's Hammerklavier Sonata spread across social media like wildfire. People couldn't stop talking about it, how she had silenced a room full of skeptics with her talent, how her calm confidence had turned an awkward moment into something magical. The video racked up millions of views within hours, and soon, news outlets picked up the story. Headlines ranged from Chuck Norris's wife stuns nation with piano mastery to Mary Norris proves talent runs deeper than fame. Greg, who had initially mocked her, found himself at the center of criticism. Viewers flooded his social media accounts with comments calling him out for underestimating Mary. Some accused him of being rude, while others praised him for apologizing and giving her a platform after realizing his mistake. Despite the backlash, Greg handled it surprisingly well. He appeared on morning radio shows and late-night programs, openly admitting that he'd learned a valuable lesson about humility. "I went into that interview thinking I knew what to expect," he said during one appearance. But Mary reminded me and everyone watching that you should never judge someone based on assumptions. Lisa, too, reflected on the experience. She had always admired Mary's composure, but hadn't fully grasped the depth of her talent until that night. In interviews afterward, Lisa spoke about how inspiring it was to see someone so unassuming step up and shine when challenged. "Mary didn't need to prove anything to us," Lisa told a reporter. "She did it because she loves music, not because she wanted attention. That's what makes her so remarkable." As for Mary, she stayed grounded despite the sudden fame. Her phone buzzed constantly with calls and messages from friends, family, and even strangers thanking her for sharing her gift. Chuck Norris, her husband, stood by her side through it all, beaming with pride whenever anyone mentioned her performance. "I've always known how talented Mary is," he said in an interview, "but I think the rest of the world needed a reminder that there's more to people than meets the eye." Despite the overwhelming response, Mary chose to keep things simple. She avoided making grand statements or seeking further attention. Instead, she focused on what mattered most to her family and her passion for music. At home, life continued much as it had before, except now, reporters occasionally camped outside their house hoping for an exclusive interview. Mary politely declined every request, explaining that she preferred to let her music speak for itself. One afternoon, a few days after the show aired, Mary sat at her own piano, a smaller upright model tucked away in a cozy corner of their living room. Chuck walked in carrying 2 cups of tea, setting one down beside her. "You know," he said with a chuckle, "I think I'm starting to get used to seeing your name in headlines." Mary laughed softly, shaking her head. "It's strange, isn't it? All these years, I've been perfectly happy playing for myself, and now suddenly everyone wants to hear me play." "Well, they're lucky to have heard you at all," Chuck replied warmly. "Not everyone gets to witness greatness like that." Mary smiled, touched by his words. "Thank you for saying that. But honestly, I don't care about the attention. What matters to me is that people enjoyed the music. If my performance inspired even one person to pick up an instrument or appreciate classical music more deeply, then it was worth it." Her sincerity wasn't lost on Chuck. He admired her ability to stay humble despite the spotlight. While fame came naturally to him as an action star, Mary had always preferred staying behind the scenes. Yet here she was, handling overnight celebrity status with grace and poise. Meanwhile, invitations poured in from prestigious institutions eager to feature Mary in concerts and recitals. Renowned conservatories reached out, asking if she would consider teaching masterclasses or performing alongside celebrated musicians. Music critics hailed her interpretation of the Hammer-Clavier Sonata as one of the finest they'd ever encountered, praising her technical skill and emotional depth. One critic wrote, "Mary Norris doesn't just play the notes, she breathes life into them. Her performance was transformative, an experience few will forget." At first, Mary hesitated to accept any offers. She worried that stepping into the public eye might disrupt the quiet life she cherished. But after discussing it with Chuck, she decided to embrace the opportunity, not for herself, but to promote causes close to her heart. For years, she had supported arts education initiatives, believing strongly that access to music could change lives. Now, with a national audience paying attention, she saw a chance to amplify that message. Her first major appearance came at a benefit concert organized by a local nonprofit dedicated to providing free music lessons to underserved communities. The event took place in a historic theater packed with attendees, including families, students, and professional musicians alike. When Mary stepped onto the stage, dressed in a simple black dress, the crowd erupted into applause. She bowed modestly, then sat at the piano and began to play. This time, she chose a different piece, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. It was softer and more introspective than the Hammer-Clavier Sonata, yet equally powerful in its own way. As the melody filled the hall, listeners leaned forward, captivated once again by her artistry. By the end of the performance, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Afterward, Mary addressed the audience, speaking passionately about the importance of arts education. "Music has given me so much joy throughout my life," she said, her voice steady and heartfelt. "A child who learns to play an instrument or sing discovers not only creativity, but also discipline, patience, and self-expression. These are skills that last a lifetime no matter where life takes them." Her words resonated deeply with those in attendance. Parents nodded in agreement, while children clapped enthusiastically. Teachers approached her afterward, thanking her for shining a light on their work. Donations poured in, exceeding the organizers' expectations and ensuring that the program could expand to reach even more students. Word of Mary's advocacy efforts spread quickly, earning her widespread admiration. She became a symbol of quiet, strength, and determination, proving that true influence comes not from seeking attention but from using your gifts to uplift others. Even critics who had initially dismissed her as just another celebrity spouse revised their opinions, acknowledging her authenticity and generosity. Back at home, Mary returned to her routine, finding comfort in the familiar rhythms of daily life. She practiced piano every morning, losing herself in the music as sunlight streamed through the windows. Chuck often joined her, sipping coffee and listening quietly. Their bond grew stronger as they navigated this new chapter together, supporting each other through the highs and lows. Though Mary remained selective about public appearances, she agreed to participate in a documentary series highlighting individuals who used their talents to make a difference. Filmmakers followed her as she visited schools, mentored young musicians, and performed at community events. Through it all, she stayed true to herself, refusing to let fame alter her values or priorities. By the time the documentary aired, Mary had cemented her place not just as a musician, but as a role model. Viewers marveled at her dedication to her craft and her commitment to giving back. Social media lit up with posts from people inspired by her story, many vowing to pursue their own passions fearlessly. Greg watched the documentary from his office, reflecting on how far things had come since that fateful night on his show. He sent Mary a handwritten note, thanking her for reminding him and countless others that everyone has hidden talents waiting to be discovered. "You didn't just amaze the nation," he wrote. "You taught us all to look beyond the surface and see the beauty within." Mary read the note with a smile, tucking it away in a drawer alongside other mementos. To her, the real reward wasn't the accolades or recognition. It was knowing that her music had touched hearts and opened doors for others. And as she sat down at her piano once more, ready to practice, She felt grateful for the journey that had brought her here. As weeks turned into months, Mary Norris's life settled into a new rhythm. The whirlwind of attention had slowed, but its effects lingered. People continued to recognize her in public, sometimes at the grocery store, other times at local parks or coffee shops. Strangers would approach her with kind words, sharing stories about how her performance had inspired them. Some talked about picking up instruments they hadn't touched in years, while others mentioned enrolling their children in music lessons. Each story warmed Mary's heart, reinforcing her belief that art had the power to connect and transform lives. Despite her growing fame, Mary remained deeply committed to her quiet, unassuming lifestyle. She spent most mornings practicing piano, losing herself in the melodies that flowed so naturally from her fingertips. Afternoons were reserved for family time, cooking meals with Chuck, taking long walks together, or simply sitting outside under the shade of an old oak tree. Evenings often found her reading books on music theory or history, always eager to learn more about the craft she loved so much. But Mary also embraced her role as an advocate for arts education. She traveled occasionally to speak at schools and community centers, sharing her journey and encouraging young people to explore their creativity. Her talks were never flashy or rehearsed. Instead, she spoke honestly about her own struggles and joys as a musician. "It's not about being perfect," she told students during one visit to an inner-city school. "It's about finding something you love and sticking with it even when it gets hard." The students listened intently, many hanging on her every word. One boy, barely 10 years old, raised his hand shyly after her talk. "Do you think I could ever play like you?" he asked, clutching a battered violin case. Mary smiled warmly and knelt down to meet his gaze. "Of course you can," she said firmly. "All it takes is practice and patience, and remember, it's okay to make mistakes, they're part of learning." Her answer brought tears to the boy's eyes, and several teachers later told Mary that his confidence soared after their conversation. Stories like this became common wherever she went. Parents thanked her for reigniting their children's interest in music, while educators praised her for shining a light on the importance of arts programs in schools. Meanwhile, Greg Miller's career took an unexpected turn. His initial mockery of Mary had drawn criticism, but his subsequent apology and reflection earned him respect from viewers who appreciated his willingness to grow. He began using his platform differently, focusing less on snarky humor and more on meaningful conversations. During interviews, he made a point of asking guests thoughtful questions, giving them space to share their passions and talents. Audiences noticed the change, and ratings for his show improved as a result. Greg reached out to Mary once again, this time inviting her back to discuss her advocacy work. Though hesitant at first, Mary agreed, seeing it as another opportunity to spread awareness about arts education. When she arrived at the studio, Greg greeted her warmly, shaking her hand and thanking her for inspiring him to rethink his approach to hosting. Their second appearance together was vastly different from the first, full of genuine admiration and mutual respect. During the interview, Greg asked Mary what advice she had for others who might feel overshadowed by someone else's success. "I think it's important to focus on what makes you happy," Mary replied thoughtfully. "For me, that's always been music. It doesn't matter if no one else notices. It's something I do for myself. But when you find joy in what you're doing, people around you will notice eventually." Her words resonated deeply with viewers, sparking conversations online about self-worth and pursuing personal passions. Many shared their own stories of overcoming doubt and finding fulfillment in unexpected places. Mary's message seemed to strike a chord with people from all walks of life, proving that authenticity was universally appealing. Back home, Mary continued to balance her public engagements with private moments of peace. She often played piano, late at night, filling the house with soft, haunting melodies that echoed through empty rooms. Chuck sometimes joined her, sitting quietly nearby as she played. Though he rarely spoke during these sessions, his presence was comforting, a reminder that she wasn't alone in her journey. One evening, as Mary practiced Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, Chuck walked in carrying 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to her and sat beside her on the bench, listening intently. When she finished, he nodded approvingly. "You know, he said with a grin. "You're starting to give me a run for my money when it comes to impressing people." Mary laughed, nudging him playfully. "Well, maybe we should team up sometime. You handle the action scenes and I'll handle the dramatic music." Chuck chuckled, raising his glass in a mock toast. "Deal." Their light-hearted banter reflected the deep bond they shared. Through all the changes in their lives, their relationship remained a source of strength and stability. Chuck supported Mary's endeavors wholeheartedly, attending events and cheering her on whenever possible. In return, Mary encouraged him to keep pursuing his dreams, reminding him that age didn't define ambition. As autumn approached, Mary received an invitation to perform at a prestigious music festival in New York City. The event featured some of the world's finest classical musicians, and organizers hoped her participation would draw larger crowds. At first, Mary hesitated, unsure whether she belonged among such accomplished artists. But Chuck urged her to accept, pointing out that her talent deserved recognition alongside theirs. "I'm not saying you need validation," he told her one evening as they discussed the offer. "But think about the message it sends, not just to aspiring musicians, but to everyone watching. You've worked hard for this, Mary. Don't let fear hold you back." His words gave her courage, and she decided to take the leap. Preparing for the festival required intense practice, but Mary welcomed the challenge. She immersed herself in the pieces she planned to perform, refining each note until it felt flawless. Her dedication paid off. When she stepped onto the stage, in New York, the audience greeted her with thunderous applause. That night, Mary played selections from Bach, Chopin, and Rachmaninoff, showcasing her versatility as a musician. Her interpretations were breathtaking, earning standing ovations after every piece. Critics raved about her performance, calling her a hidden gem and one of the most captivating pianists of our time. For Mary, though, the real reward came from seeing the audience's faces light up with emotion. After the concert, she mingled with attendees at a reception hosted by the festival organizers. Musicians, composers, and fans alike lined up to congratulate her, many expressing gratitude for the inspiration she provided. One elderly woman, a retired piano teacher, clasped Mary's hands tightly. "Your playing reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place," she said tearfully. "Thank you for keeping that spirit alive." Moments like these reaffirmed Mary's decision to step into the spotlight. While she still preferred a quiet life, she recognized the value of using her platform to promote causes she cared about. By sharing her gift, she hoped to inspire others to pursue their passions fearlessly. As winter approached, Mary returned home, eager to recharge and spend the holidays with family. She decorated the house with twinkling lights and garlands, filling it with the scent of pine and freshly baked cookies. Chuck helped string popcorn for the tree, laughing as kernels scattered across the floor. Together, they created traditions that blended simplicity with warmth, cherishing the moments they shared. On Christmas Eve, Mary gathered her extended family around the piano for a sing-along. As she accompanied them on familiar carols, laughter and voices filled the room. For Mary, this was the essence of happiness, not fame or accolades, but connection. Whether through music or everyday interactions, she believed that true fulfillment came from touching hearts and building relationships. Looking ahead to the new year, Mary felt a sense of purpose. She knew challenges lay ahead, but she faced them with optimism, knowing she had the support of those she loved. Her journey, from a quiet homemaker to a celebrated musician, had taught her that everyone has unique gifts worth sharing. And though the road wasn't always easy, it was undoubtedly rewarding. For Mary Norris, life wasn't about seeking glory or validation. It was about finding joy in the small things, inspiring others through kindness and passion, and staying true to oneself. As she closed the lid of her piano that night, she felt grateful, not for the applause or headlines, but for the opportunity to make a difference, one note at a time. The new year brought a fresh start for Mary Norris, but it also came with new opportunities and challenges. By now, she had become a household name, not just as Chuck Norris's wife, but as a talented musician and advocate for arts education. Her performances continued to draw large crowds, and her message of perseverance and passion resonated deeply with people from all walks of life. Yet despite the growing attention, Mary remained grounded, focusing on what truly mattered to her, sharing her love for music and supporting others in their creative journeys. In February, Mary received an invitation that surprised even her. A renowned music conservatory in Chicago asked her to serve as a guest lecturer for a semester, teaching advanced piano students and mentoring young musicians. It was a significant honor, one that many professional pianists would have jumped at, but Mary hesitated. She had never considered herself a teacher, and the idea of standing in front of a classroom full of aspiring artists felt daunting. Still, she couldn't ignore the opportunity to inspire the next generation. After discussing it with Chuck, who encouraged her to embrace the challenge, Mary accepted the offer. She spent weeks preparing lesson plans and selecting pieces for her students to study. When she arrived at the conservatory for her first class, she was greeted by a group of eager faces, students ranging from teenagers to adults, each carrying their own dreams and ambitions. Mary began the session by playing a short piece, setting the tone for the semester ahead. "I'm not here to tell you how to play," she told them after finishing. "I'm here to help you find your own voice. Music isn't about perfection, it's about expression. Don't be afraid to take risks or make mistakes, they're part of the process." Her words struck a chord with the students, many of whom had struggled with self-doubt and pressure to excel. Over the course of the semester, Mary worked closely with them, offering guidance and encouragement while pushing them to explore new techniques and styles. She often stayed late after class, answering questions and listening to their concerns. To her surprise, teaching turned out to be incredibly rewarding. Not only did she see growth in her students, but she also learned valuable lessons herself. One student, a shy teenager named Emily, stood out in particular. Emily had extraordinary technical skill but lacked confidence in her ability to perform. During rehearsals, she would stumble over difficult passages, her hands shaking with nerves. Mary noticed this early on and decided to focus extra attention on helping Emily build self-assurance. "Close your eyes," Mary instructed during one practice session. "Forget about the notes for a moment. Just feel the music. Let it guide you." At first, Emily resisted, unsure how to let go of her rigid focus on perfection. But slowly, with Mary's patient coaching, she began to relax. By the end of the semester, Emily performed a solo recital in front of the entire conservatory, earning a standing ovation from both her peers and faculty members. Afterward, she hugged Mary tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "I never thought I could do something like this." Moments like these reminded Mary why she had agreed to teach in the first place. Seeing her students grow and succeed filled her with pride, knowing she had played a small part in their journey. The experience deepened her commitment to arts, education, reinforcing her belief that access to music could change lives. As spring approached, Mary returned home, exhausted but fulfilled. Teaching had been demanding, but it had also reignited her passion for music in unexpected ways. She spent her days practicing new pieces and collaborating with local musicians, finding joy in the creative process. At night, she reflected on how far she had come since her appearance on Greg Miller's show, a moment that had seemed so ordinary at the time, but had ultimately transformed her life. Greg, too, had undergone a transformation. His decision to use his platform more thoughtfully had earned him renewed respect from viewers and colleagues alike. He frequently reached out to Mary, asking for advice on hosting guests with grace and humility. Their friendship grew stronger, over time, built on mutual admiration and shared experiences. During one phone call, Greg thanked her again for inspiring him to grow as a person. "You've changed my career and maybe even my life," he admitted. "I don't think I'll ever forget that night." Mary smiled, touched by his sincerity. "We all have room to grow, Greg. What matters is that we keep learning and trying to be better." By summer, Mary's advocacy work had gained national recognition. She was invited to speak at a major arts conference in Washington, D.C., where she delivered a keynote address on the importance of preserving music programs in schools. Her speech was met with thunderous applause, and afterward, Educators and policymakers lined up to thank her for championing their cause. Many promised to take action, vowing to protect funding for arts education in their communities. The conference marked a turning point for Mary's efforts. Organizations across the country began reaching out, asking her to partner with them on initiatives aimed at expanding access to music. She collaborated with nonprofits to provide instruments and lessons to underprivileged children, visited classrooms to encourage budding musicians, and recorded videos promoting the benefits of arts education. Each project brought her closer to her goal of ensuring that every child had the chance to experience the transformative power of music. Despite her busy schedule, Mary made time for her family, cherishing the moments they spent together. Summers were especially special. They often took road trips to national parks, hiking trails, and camping under the stars. These adventures provided a much-needed break from the demands of public life, allowing Mary to reconnect with nature and the people she loved most. One evening, as they sat around a campfire roasting marshmallows, Chuck turned to Mary with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever miss the quiet life we used to have?" he asked. Mary considered the question for a moment before answering. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But I wouldn't trade this for anything. Being able to share my music and help others, it's given me a sense of purpose I didn't realize I was missing." Chuck nodded, understanding completely. "You've always had a gift, Mary, and now you're using it to make the world a better place. That's something to be proud of." As autumn rolled around once more, Mary found herself reflecting on the past year. So much had changed since her impromptu performance on live television, yet in many ways, she was still the same person. She valued simplicity, cherished her relationships, and poured her heart into everything she did. Fame hadn't altered her core values. If anything, it had strengthened them. On a crisp October morning, Mary sat at her piano, the golden sunlight streaming through the window. She played softly, letting the music carry her thoughts. Outside, leaves rustled in the breeze, and birds chirped cheerfully. For Mary, this was happiness, a quiet, peaceful existence enriched by the love of family and the joy of creation. Later that day, she received a letter from a young girl named Lily, who had seen Mary's performance online. Enclosed with the note was a drawing of a piano surrounded by flowers, along with a simple message: "Thank you for showing me that I can dream big." Mary held the picture close to her heart, feeling a surge of gratitude. This was why she had stepped into the spotlight, to remind people that everyone has the potential to shine, no matter where they came from or what challenges they faced. As winter approached, Mary looked forward to spending the holidays with loved ones, savoring the warmth of togetherness. She knew there would be more opportunities ahead, more concerts, more speeches, more chances to make a difference. But for now, she was content to enjoy the present moment. For Mary Norris, life wasn't defined by applause or headlines. It was about connection, creativity, and compassion. Through her music and advocacy, she had inspired countless individuals to pursue their passions and believe in themselves. And though the road hadn't always been easy, she had walked it with courage and grace, leaving a lasting legacy of kindness and inspiration. As she closed the lid of her piano that evening, Mary felt a deep sense of peace. She didn't need fame or fortune to feel fulfilled. All she needed was the knowledge that she had made a positive impact, one note, one smile, and one heart at a time.